Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. Washington State has accepted a bid to build 3 new hybrid electric ferries, the first of their kind in the United States. But not everyone's happy about Governor Ferguson's decision, and it's not because of green tech or the price tag of more than $700 million. It's who the governor picked to build them. Seattle Times reporter Nick Deshay is here to tell us more in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. New data from the Washington Office of Financial Management suggests Seattle is booming again. The office says the city's population hit 600,000 on April 1st, which is a 2.4% growth rate from last year. The Seattle Times FYI guy did some math. If both cities keep trending in the same direction, Seattle will pass San Francisco in total population within the next 2 years. The State Financial Management Office says other Seattle areas are also growing, including Bellevue, Redmond, and Shoreline. It's officially primary season. Election Day is August 5th. That's less than a month away. You can get a look at some of the candidates tonight at the Queer the Vote Candidate Forum at Massive on Capitol Hill. Candidates for City Council District 2, citywide seats 8 and 9, mayor and city attorney will be there answering questions. And a summer tradition is back at Pike Place Market starting tomorrow. The weekly Produce on Pike Farmers Market starts up again and runs every Wednesday through the summer from 3 to 7 p.m. Pike Place vendors will be selling fresh produce, and a local chef will be doing some demos. You've got until September 10th to check it out. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Washington State Ferries has needed to replace some of its aging boats for a while. And last week, they took a big step towards getting new ones. They chose a builder, Eastern Shipbuilding Group, based in Florida. Eastern will be tasked with producing these first-in-America ferries at a cost of $715.4 million. This bucks a more than 50-year-old tradition of choosing Washington shipbuilders for our state's fleet. And unsurprisingly, not everyone is happy with Governor Bob Ferguson's choice. Seattle Times transportation reporter Nick Deshay has been following the story from Jump. He's here now to talk about what it means. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, update us on how our ferry system is doing. Why do we need these new boats?
We're just lacking in boats is the simple answer, but it kind of started right before the pandemic. The state had a contract to get some more boats from its longstanding contractor, Vigor, which is on Puget Sound on Harbor Island. And they had a falling out. The state wanted these electric-powered boats. Vigor had never built one before, so their bid came in much higher than the state anticipated. And so at that point, then Governor Inslee said, let's go back to the drawing board, and that's kind of led us to where we are now.
All right, we can talk more about the money and how much it's going to cost to build these things before we talk about what they look like. How will they be different?
Well, they'll actually look a lot like some of the boats that you see out there. It's kind of a variation on the Olympic class. So those are, in my mind, the classic ferries. That includes the Samish, the Chimacum, the Suquamish, if anybody knows those. They're not the biggest ones. They're like the second biggest ones. But they're pretty big no matter what. I mean, you can fit 1,500 people on there, about 160 vehicles. So these are big boats.
So initially, there was interest from about 15 companies to build these new ferries, but it came down to just 2. Let's talk about who was in the mix.
It's Eastern, which won the bid. They're based in Florida, Panama City, Florida. And then the local Nichols brothers, they're up on Whidbey Island. And as you said, there were 15 that were interested. These are all American companies. There's a federal law from 1920 that we refer to as the Jones Act that says if a ship's going to sail or a boat's going to sail in America, it has to be built in America and crewed by Americans. And so that really limited the number of shipbuilders there were. And up until this moment, there was a state law saying you had to use Washington state shipbuilders. They lifted that after the fallout with Vigor, looking for more companies. And that's what brought the 15 in. But then it got a little more complicated because the state wants these electric-powered boats instead of diesel only, which is what the fleet runs on now. And nobody's really ever built that in America before. And so that really winnowed it down to 3 and then finally 2 shipbuilders, which actually put in bids.
Okay. All right. So a complicated structure. Before Ferguson made his decision, the CEO of Nichols Brothers tried to propose a plan to the governor. What would that have entailed?
I talked to Gavin Higgins, he's the CEO, and I think he recognized, or they recognized, their bid was much higher. You know, they had never built anything like this. They didn't actually have the infrastructure in place. They had a lot of it, but not the final stuff, unlike Eastern, which has built hundreds and hundreds of boats. So his bid came in high, and he proposed in a public letter. He sent it to the governor, and then he sent me a copy as well, saying, hey, let's split the bid. Let's build a boat. We'll have one boat built in Florida, one boat built here. That'll get more boats on the water sooner, which is what the governor has said over and over again, is that's his main goal, is to get more boats on the water sooner. I think, and I haven't talked to the governor. I've got some written statements from him, but I think, honestly, it was the price point, just so much lower than Nichols Brothers, and the fact that Eastern is a very experienced ferry builder. They've built ferries for Staten Island ferries, for Long Island ferries. So they just kind of have all the infrastructure in place, unlike Nichols. And Nichols did make the push saying, hey, let's keep this money locally. You spend more than $1 billion is what just this contract is for. Keep that in state, keep it funding local unions, local workers, get these tradespeople experienced. But at the end of the day, I think the governor just said, we need to spend this money a little more wisely. And he chose Eastern.
How did Nichols Brothers take the news?
Yeah, I talked to Gavin, and he was pretty upset. He was disappointed. He was really hoping, and he thought his pitch was good to split the bid, and he thought the governor would maybe say, hey, we'll buy one for a little less and get Eastern to build it, but let's try to get this going on here and, lay the groundwork for decades of ferry building here. That's how the Gavin Higgins at Nichols saw it. He was pretty shocked, and, he was really...
He said it was the end of ferry building in Washington. He did.
And, I'm looking into that. It's kind of a hard thing to really truth test, but, he may be right. And there are dozens of shipbuilders around the state, on this side of the state anyway. And there is Vigor, the big one that used to build the ferries, that is in building ships for the military, so they're still around. But there's really no big shipbuilder other than Vigor. And I think Nichols was like, hey, if we really are serious about keeping the ferry building here, let's put some investment into it. And so he said that. He stands by it. Time will tell, of course. And I do think if the state had spent $1 billion here, that would have at least started that shipbuilding process. But, I also talked to Senator Marco Lias. He leads the Senate Transportation Committee, so he's really involved in all these decisions as well. He says, listen, this doesn't mean it's the end of ferry building here. Like, there's going to be another contract. We're going to need a new boat. The state's plan is to get 16 new boats by 2040, something like that. So this is only for 3 boats. There's still 13 more the state needs.
Well, like we've been talking about, it really came down to money. Why was Nichols Brothers' bid so much more expensive?
I think it comes down to the lack of experience building something like this. Part of their bid said they needed to build a painting facility and a welding facility, things that Eastern already has that they don't need to build. And so part of the bid was high just because they need to build infrastructure. But more to the point, and this is what Gavin Higgins would say, is there's stiffer rules in Washington compared to Florida. We have higher wages, we have stronger environmental protections and labor protections, we have apprenticeship programs that you have to fulfill if you're working on a state contract. You have to meet prevailing wage standards. So he was saying, listen, I have way more costs just because I'm housed in Washington state compared to my competitor in Florida. I think he did try to work that angle a little bit, maybe behind the scenes, maybe before the bid was actually chosen, pointing out to this Democratic Party-run state that Florida is run by Governor Ron DeSantis, very different politics than Governor Ferguson. He tried to point out, it costs me more to build in this state because of rules state politicians have made, so maybe give me some help here. I should say also, part of the bid for in-state builders, it dropped the bid by 13% just because they were in-state.
And it was still a lot more. It does make you wonder what it says that we went to a state like Florida, that do we care about environmental standards and labor standards as much as we say?
That's a good question. I'm not one to answer it, but I think that's a good question that a lot of people are asking. It should also be noted that is the Gulf. There's a lot of shipbuilding there and historic shipbuilding. And so I don't think it's only those fewer rules or protections. It's also just a industrial, historic place to build ships. And I think that does help out as well.
Republicans have come out against this as well. We got a couple of emails this morning from the party. What are they saying?
Oh, I've heard 2 different things from people in the Republican Party. Senator Curtis King, he is the ranking member, so he also leads the Senate Transportation Committee besides Senator Lias. He's supportive of it. He's saying, listen, this is saving money for our taxpayers. This is a good choice by the governor. The ranking member on the House Transportation Committee, Representative Barkus, he didn't like it. He said we should have kept this money in state. This is a lot of money that the state is spending, and it should have been spent here. And so I think the members of the Republican Party have two different views. I can't say about the Democrats. I've heard everybody supporting the governor, who, of course, is a Democrat as well. But I'd imagine there's probably some grousing. It's a lot of money to spend, and it's a lot of money to spend on pretty much the farthest away you can get in the continental United States.
All right, well, what do the timelines look like? I know 2029 is on the table. What are the next steps?
I think that's the earliest. It might be 2030. You know, the head of WashDOT, Julie Meredith, she said earliest at 2030. So we don't know yet. They haven't signed the contract. They've awarded it. They're still kind of working on the details, and I think it'll be built in there. But yeah, we have years ahead, and you know, I actually hope to go down to Florida and see what's going on at Eastern and look at their shipyard and see some of the ferry be built. But it's going to be a little bit of time before we see a brand new ferry.
And I wonder, after these new hydroelectric ferries are christened years from now, what do we do with the old boats they replace?
I've written a couple times on the boats that are retired, and they're really not easy to get rid of. You know, they're big, hulking steel contraptions. But yeah, they try to get rid of them. And, you know, there was one called the Elwha, and just in the last year, they thought it was going to head to a scrap heap in South America, and they started towing it out, and it turned out that wasn't going to happen for various reasons. They didn't have the right equipment, and they had some labor problems on board, went back to dock, and then actually Nichols Brothers, they bought it, or they got it. I don't think they paid much, if anything, and now it's sitting up there in Everett, and they're using it for a floating office.
A floating office? That's great. Is there any scrap in boats? What normally happens?
There's a lot of steel, and so they kind of empty them out. They pull out all the furniture, they pull out the engines, stuff like that, and then they just have steel they need to do something with. And so they have various lives. You know, there's some that are parked here and there. There's terrible images you can see of these boats just kind of rotting into the ground somewhere in Mexico. They've been sold to different ferry units. I know there was one that was traveling between Tanzania and Madagascar, something like that. So these boats have various post lives after they've moved around the commuters of Puget Sound. But usually they're done, and the state has trouble finding their final resting place.
Right on. All right. Well, we'll wait for our new electric ferries. Nick Deshay, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Shane Mailing. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.